The night air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying leaves. A full moon loomed above the twisted trees, casting silver streaks of light onto the cracked pavement of an old country road. It was the kind of night where shadows moved on their own, whispering secrets to those who dared to listen. Ethan Parker had never been one to believe in ghost stories. He was a rational man, a city boy forced to spend his summer in his grandmother's isolated cabin deep in the Appalachian woods. The town of Black Hollow was nothing more than a forgotten on the map, a place where time stood still and superstition ran deep. He had heard the rumors, the ones about her. The girl with goat legs. The townsfolk spoke of her in hushed tones, their eyes darting toward the darkened tree line whenever her name was mentioned. No one knew where she had come from, only that she had always been there, lurking in the forest, watching. Some claimed she was a curse, a creature born of old sins and blood magic. Others believed she was a warning, a sign of something far worse that slumbered beneath the town. Ethan had laughed at the stories, brushing them off as nothing more than backwoods superstition. That was until the night he saw her. The first encounter. It was just past midnight when Ethan decided to take a walk. The silence of the cabin pressed in on him, making it impossible to sleep. He grabbed his flashlight and stepped onto the winding trail that led toward the old bridge, a place the locals avoided. The air was unnaturally still, the usual chirping of crickets replaced by an eerie hush. His footsteps crunched against the gravel, the sound too loud in the oppressive quiet. A strange unease prickled at the back of his neck, but he pressed on, convincing himself it was just his imagination. Then he saw her. She stood at the edge of the bridge, her long black hair cascading over her face, hiding her features. She wore a tattered white dress that billowed slightly, despite the absence of wind. Something about her felt wrong. "Hey!" Ethan called out, his voice breaking the silence. She lifted her head slowly, revealing hollow, sunken eyes, dark voids that seemed to pull him in. Ethan took a step back, the weight of something unseen pressing against his chest. That was when he noticed her legs. From the knees down, her flesh twisted into something unnatural. Her legs bent backward, covered in coarse black fur that ended in two cloven hooves. A sickening jolt of terror shot through him. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the kind that made his stomach churn, a grin too wide, too sharp, too knowing. Then she moved. Chase. Ethan barely had time to react before she lunged toward him. He turned and ran, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he sprinted back toward the cabin. The sound of her hooves clattering against the pavement sent ice through his veins. She was fast. Faster than anything human. The forest blurred past him as he stumbled onto the dirt path leading home. His lungs burned, his muscles screamed, but he didn't dare slow down. A laugh, a high, childlike giggle, echoed through the trees, sending a fresh wave of panic through him. She was toying with him. The cabin's porch came into view. With one final burst of energy, Ethan threw himself against the door, fumbling with the lock before slamming it shut behind him. He collapsed to the floor, his chest heaving. Silence. He listened, his heart pounding in his ears. No footsteps, no laughter, nothing. Had she given up? He crept toward the window, his fingers trembling as he pulled back the curtain. She was standing just outside. Her face was inches from the glass, her black eyes locked onto his. She tilted her head, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she lifted one hand and placed it against the windowpane. Ethan's blood ran cold. Her fingers were too long, the joints bending in ways they shouldn't. Her nails, jagged and black, scraped lightly against the glass. Then she whispered, her voice slithering through the cracks in the walls. "You shouldn't have seen me." The lights flickered. The room filled with an unnatural chill. And then she was gone. The curse begins. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He sat curled up in the corner of the cabin, his baseball bat clutched in white-knuckled hands. The sun rose, but the fear remained. He tried to convince himself it had been a hallucination, a trick of exhaustion and nerves. But deep down he knew the truth. She was real. And she had seen him. The townspeople had warned him, and he hadn't listened. Now he feared it was too late. As the days passed, strange things began to happen. At night, he heard hooves clattering outside his window, slow and deliberate. Scratches appeared on the door, long jagged marks as if something had tried to claw its way inside. And then the voices started. They whispered from the corners of the room, from beneath the floorboards, from inside the walls. "You shouldn't have seen me." Ethan's sanity began to unravel. He avoided mirrors, terrified of what he might see in their reflection. The air around him felt heavier, like he was being watched even in an empty room. The worst part, he started seeing her everywhere, in the reflection of the lake, at the edge of the forest, standing motionless beneath the flickering streetlights of the abandoned road. Always watching, always waiting. Ethan knew he couldn't stay in Black Hollow any longer. If he didn't leave soon, he feared he'd never leave at all. But something told him she wouldn't let him go that easily. Because the last time he saw her standing just outside his window, she wasn't alone. There were others. Figures with twisted legs and hollow eyes. A family of creatures that should not exist. And they were coming for him. The night stretched endlessly, thick with the weight of unseen eyes. Ethan sat rigid on the cabin floor, gripping his baseball bat, though deep down, he knew it was useless. She was out there. They were out there. Through the thin wooden walls. He heard the faintest sound, cloven hooves tapping against the earth. Slow, deliberate, patient. A shiver crawled up his spine as whispers slithered through the cracks in the windows. The voices overlapped, hissing, giggling, murmuring words he couldn't understand. Then silence. Ethan barely had time to breathe before a loud knock shattered the stillness. 1, 2, 3 times. His heart hammered. His mind screamed at him not to look. But something, some deep primal force, compelled him forward. With shaking hands, he approached the door and pressed his eye to the peephole. First he saw nothing. Only darkness. Then she stepped into view. The girl with goat legs. Her face was inches from the door, her lips twisted into a smile far too wide, as if her skin barely contained the bones underneath. Her black, hollow eyes bore into him, unblinking. She lifted a single hand and dragged one long, jagged nail down the wood, the screeching sound splitting through the quiet. Ethan stumbled backward. Voice, low, unnatural inside his head. "Let me in, Ethan." He hadn't told her his name. The air in the room grew heavier, suffocating. His vision swam, darkness creeping into the edges. His fingers twitched toward the lock, an unseen force urging him, commanding him to open the door. Whoa. With every ounce of willpower, Ethan tore himself away, stumbling toward the back of the cabin. He needed to leave. The escape. He grabbed his backpack, already half-packed from the paranoia of the past few days, and threw open the back door. The forest loomed ahead, black and endless, but he had no choice. His truck was parked at the edge of the dirt road, just beyond the trees. If he could reach it, if he could escape Black Hollow, he might have a chance. Ethan sprinted. Branches clawed at his skin as he tore through the woods, the heavy silence pressing down on him. The only sounds were his ragged breaths and the pounding of his feet against the earth. Then he heard them. The hooves. Faster this time. Multiple sets chasing him. Surrounding him. He didn't look back. He didn't dare. The truck came into view, sitting at the edge of the clearing like a lifeline. He lunged toward it, fumbling for the keys in his pocket. The hooves were right behind him. He wrenched the door open, threw himself inside, and slammed the locks. His fingers shook as he jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. For a brief, fleeting second, relief washed over him. Then he looked up. She was sitting in the passenger seat. The truth revealed. Ethan's scream died in his throat. The girl was closer than before, her face mere inches from his own. He could see the details now. The way her skin seemed stretched too tight over her bones, the faint scent of damp earth clinging to her. And her eyes. Black, endless voids that pulled him in. "You can't leave," she whispered, her voice a sickening melody. Ethan's body locked up. His limbs wouldn't move, his fingers frozen on the steering wheel. He tried to scream but no sound came out. She tilted her head, studying him like he was something small and breakable. "You saw me," she murmured. "And now you're part of it." "Part of what?" Ethan rasped, forcing the words past his tightening throat. Her smile widened. "The cycle." The truck shuddered violently. A deep, guttural sound echoed from the trees. Something ancient, something massive stirring from beneath the earth. The other figures emerged from the forest. Half human, half beast. Twisted, malformed shadows that stood just outside the headlights' glow. Ethan's heart pounded wildly. "No, this isn't real. This isn't." The girl placed a cold, clawed hand against his chest. "This town was never meant to exist," she whispered. "We were never meant to exist." The engine sputtered. The lights flickered. "The people of Black Hollow made a deal long ago," she continued, her voice like silk. "And the debt must always be paid." Ethan's mind spun. He had heard the stories, the warnings. The town had a past steeped in blood. Rumors of disappearances, of things lurking in the woods. "You weren't supposed to see us," the girl whispered. Her grip tightened. "You weren't supposed to know." Ethan gasped. His vision blurred. His chest tightening as if the very air was being pulled from his lungs. Darkness crawled at the edges of his sight. The last thing he saw was her smile. Then everything went black. The final fate. Ethan woke to the sound of birds. For a brief moment, confusion clouded his thoughts. He was outside lying on the ground. Sunlight dappled through the trees, casting golden streaks across his skin. Had it been a dream? He sat up. His body ached, his head pounding like he had been hit by something massive. Then he noticed the cabin. It was still there, old, abandoned, covered in ivy. But something was wrong. The windows were shattered. The wood was rotting, as if it had been left untouched for years. Panic surged through him. He reached for his phone. He stumbled toward the dirt road, toward where his truck should have been. Nothing. Only empty space, as if no vehicle had ever been parked there. His breath quickened. He turned back toward the trees, toward the town in the distance. Maybe someone, anyone, could tell him what had happened. But as he took a step forward, he heard it. The sound of hooves. Low. Deliberate. He turned and froze. There, standing at the tree line, was her. The girl with goat legs. But this time she wasn't smiling. This time, she looked at him with something close to recognition. Something clicked in Ethan's mind. A horrible, undeniable truth. He had seen her. Now he was part of it. The cycle had claimed him. And soon someone else would come. Someone who didn't believe the stories. Someone who would wander too far into the woods. And when they did, when their eyes met his for the first time, Ethan Parker would be the one standing at the edge of the forest, watching, waiting, for the cycle to begin again.